So how much does it cost to source a business for sale that you can then acquire and integrate to your portfolio or start running if that is the first acquisition that you're planning to make? Let's dive into the numbers. I broke down some of the key figures that you need to consider when sourcing a deal. Some of you might be familiar with those, others might just be at their first acquisition. Therefore, they might want to have a little bit of insight into what they're getting themselves into, and also what are the costs associated to sourcing a deal alone. Because let's be clear, we're going to be talking about the sourcing process, not the due diligence, quality of earnings, and closing cost. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marco Palomero. I help private equity groups, search funds, family offices, brokers source qualified transactions, meaning businesses that want to exit, business owners that are interested in selling their business, so that these people can get access to multi-million-dollar opportunities that they can then buy or list on their own platforms. And in this video, I want to break down some of the costs associated to sourcing deals, because in some instances I've seen people say, well, it's going to be much easier for me to search deals on my own, or it's going to be much cheaper for me to do everything on my own. Well, is that really the case? Let's dive into the numbers and see what we're talking about here. So as you can see, I compiled a quick spreadsheet here just to give you a sense of some of the basic costs associated to sourcing a deal if you were to do it on your own, or if you had your firm shoulder all the costs associated with sourcing. Depends whether or not you're going about acquisitions on your own. Maybe you're a search fund, or maybe you're a private equity group, therefore the firm is paying for this cost. So let's start with the data part. So there are tons of databases out there that you can scrape data from to originate quality contacts and business owners that might be interested in a sale. I listed some of them in no particular order. In reality, I put them into order based on the cost they have associated with it. So there's Invent, Axial, Grata, ZoomInfo, SourceDrop. There are many others, but those are just some examples to give you an idea of what would be the price that you need to sustain in order to get quality data. So we start from 4,000 a year to 20,000 a year, and that is of course assuming that you're only going to buy one of them. And some people might want to use more. There's arguments for using more than one, but in my experience, also arguments for not using any of them. But the point I'm getting at it, let's take the average of these. I put different figures for exactly this purpose. I wanted to make it a little bit, I wanted to include every possible database, including different costs associated with it, and then average them out to make sure we are looking at the market from the right perspective. So if we average them out, we come up with a data cost yearly that is around $12,000. So that will be about $1,000 per month, but that is already calculated. So let's talk yearly first. So that is data alone. So just for getting the data and collecting information about people that you might want to reach out to, you're gonna put down 12 grand. And there are arguments for it. For some big firms or family offices, that might be a cost that is de minimis compared to the amount of money they make. For other people, it might be a huge cost to sustain, especially if you're a search fund or if you're an investor that is trying to buy a company for the first time, or maybe a broker that is sourcing deals and trying to get listings on his platform. So this figure really depends on what's your current situation. I still feel the data cost is quite steep, and there are ways to offset that. And when we work with clients one-on-one, generally we take care of sourcing the data on their behalf, so they don't have this cost associated with the process. But that is a whole other subject. Let's first stick to the entire process, and then I will comment on that a few minutes later. So this is data alone. So just to get information about people, you're gonna pay 12 grand on average. And let's keep in mind that this is going to give you access to data that is accessible on these platforms. And by the fact they might be quite extensive in the type of information that they host, they're still not going to cover the entire market, because they're basically going to rely on online resources, not offline resources, which means if you're sourcing transactions that are smaller in size, in my experience, below 10 million in enterprise value, you might miss a lot of opportunities simply because these deals are not going to be on these platforms. Sometimes they don't have websites. These companies might not have public information. Therefore, it's going to be harder for the platform itself to pull the data of these businesses in for you to see them in there. So that is the first challenge that you're going to face when you work with one specific platform. They might not have coverage over the entire market. And in addition to that, you're going to be paying for a lot of data that in most instances you're not going to use, because if you're a private equity, maybe a search fund, or even a broker to some extent, or an advisor, you're going to have certain industries that you want to target because they are fundamentally the industry that you focus on. And most of the other data is going to be redundant. So other industries are not going to be super relevant. And to some respect, even some of the data in your own industry is not going to be helpful for you. And so the point I'm getting at is you're going to be paying a huge amount of money, generally upfront for a year, just to get access to a bunch of data that is not really useful to you. Just a tiny percentage will be. And so it's important to understand what you're getting yourself into. For some people, might be absolutely worth it. If you're a big investment firm, that's certainly the case. But for most other people, this might be a huge cost that is not necessary for you to sustain. Now, getting into the tech part, let's say that you want to organize this process and you want to maybe do a little bit of outreach, because of course, if you're pulling data, you're going to be reaching out to people. You want to centralize everything into a CRM to keep everything organized. Now, if you want a good CRM that is worth its salt, it's probably going to cost you around $100 per month, so $1,200 a year. Anything below that, I mean, you can find cheap CRMs, but in my experience, they are not really helping you with all the tools and functionalities that can help you create a smooth process for handling deals. So overall, $1,200 is the price that you're going to face for CRM. Then let's say you want to do some outreach on different channels. We're talking about LinkedIn, emails, and some others. So for LinkedIn, we're talking Sales Navigator, $1,200 per year, pretty standard. And then if you want to integrate some tools to make some automations, I estimated $50 per month, de minimis, so $600 a year, but still stacking up, in the overall balance. And in email, we're talking about basically the same thing. If you want to use a sending tool to send out emails in bulk, probably it's going to be around $100 per month. If you want to do small volumes, might be higher if you want to do bigger volumes. And then you're going to need to set up domains and inboxes. Here I estimated for 30 inboxes. Generally, it's going to give you a good volume, so $500 per year, maybe a little bit more than that. And then there is the topic of SMS calls and letter campaigns. So for those of you wanting to do maybe SMS outreach, cold calls, letters, there's going to be these costs associated with it that certainly are related to the amounts of volume that you generate. Because if you only send out 1,000 letters, you pay less than sending out 10,000 letters. Same thing goes for the amount of calls that you make in SMSs. So there's an estimate here. There's no real figure. I mean, I think we can estimate that to be between 2 and 10 grand a year, something like that. So if we average that out, it's probably bringing us around a cost of 6,000 and $500 per month. I think it's a fair estimate for these variable costs and other channels to reach out to business owners and potentially originate businesses for sale. Now, this is just a kind of like raw kind of calculation of some of the costs associated for building up an infrastructure that is going to originate motivated sellers, and they're going to be proprietary deals for you. So you're going to build out channels of outreach to connect with business owners directly, and then nurture that relationship to get these motivated sellers, to the bottom of your funnel. If you are acquire, buy the company. If you're an advisor or a broker, list them with your company and then help them sell. So tech cost alone is going to be probably 10 grand a year or something like that, which brings the total cost of data and tech stack alone to $23,000 per year or 2 grand a month. Now, this is without the work that you're going to need to put into it to actually source the deals, because here I'm just talking about buying the stuff, so buying the data, buying the tools, and all the kind of like platforms that you're going to need to use to then originate the data. So you're going to get all these pieces that are scattered, and then you need to pull them together to ultimately source the deal. So you got to put work into it and many hours of your time in order to source the deals. Now, that price and that cost only you can estimate. If you estimate your time being worth $50 an hour, multiply that by the amount of hours you're going to spend sourcing deals every single week, and you can add that to the equation. If you estimate that to be 100, 200, 300, do the math and add it to the equation. The point I'm getting at is we're getting to a sizable figure for at least in small search funds, investment firms, and so forth. And to some extent, you might say, well, even if I'm, even if I'm paying for these tools alone, I'm still missing something, because I might not be the person that wants to do and kind of like perform all these activities like the outreach, the nurturing, and all the other stuff. So I might want a person on my team to take care of all this. And in that case, I added an additional line that is a deal sourcing analyst that you can bring into your team that is going to take care of running this entire system. So picking up all this stuff, pulling it together, and use it to ultimately source the deals, because you might be the person that closes the deals and doesn't necessarily sources the opportunity. So I estimated 80 grand a year, and I did that by pulling some data about salaries in the United States for a financial analyst. Here we have 70 grand a year on pay scale, 81,000 on Indeed. And then here on Randstad is 90,000 euros, so it's probably more European based. But the point is, I averaged out a couple of different resources, and it came out to be around 80 grand a year if you want to bring in somebody to run this system, which brings the total cost of this entire setup to around 100 grand a year. Now, let's think about that for a second. Well, if you are a private equity group or an investment firm, basically a large firm that can sustain some fixed costs like this, you might say, well, that might be worth it if we get enough deals through the door. We get a couple multi-million-dollar opportunities and we close them. Everything is going to be worth it. What if I tell you that you can spend a fourth or a third of this amount and not have all this overhead on your shoulder, while at the same time having an entire team that works on your behalf to source these opportunities? Would that be worth it? Well, I think it would, because you can then reallocate these resources and maybe also this person towards closing deals instead of finding them, which means this money is going to be better spent because that person is going to work on generating actual revenue for you, which means working on deals, closing them, so that you can then acquire more businesses and pull in more deals for your portfolio. On the flip side, if you are an individual search fund or a small company that only has this type of fixed cost associated to your infrastructure because you're going to be the one doing the work, let me ask you this: is it really worth it to invest all this and still have to do all the work that is necessary to find the motivated sellers without actually having a clear system in place that you can utilize repeatedly to pull all these systems together and ultimately get the opportunities through the door? Well, some people might think, well, it is worth it because I'm on this journey anyway. But in my experience, that just ends up wasting a lot of their time doing the wrong things, and the learning curve is generally quite steep. As a consequence, when you realize that you can offset part of this cost by, maybe cutting this in half and working with a third party that will take care of the entire process for you, then you get the best of both worlds, because you reduce the cost, you invest in somebody that is going to take care of the process for you. So instead of just getting a bunch of tools that do nothing for you, unless you put in the effort, you get somebody that actually works on the process and has a structured system for sourcing deals, then you're basically, closing a deal of a lifetime, because you're paying less and you're getting more. And that's exactly what we do when we work with people one-on-one and we source deals on their behalf. We're basically taking all this cost off their shoulders and the effort as well, because the objective for us is to completely eliminate the sourcing process for them so they can spend all their time on closing transactions and making more deals. The idea there is to leverage a three-step system, which is attraction, qualification, and booking, when we source deals, which means we source data from a variety of different platforms, and those are not the only ones that we use, by the way, because we have alternative ways to get even more data that's not accessible to these guys. And then we'll run the tech stack that is a little bit more complex than this, because it has automation and AI and other features that increase results and performance. So it's a little bit more expensive than that, but still you get access to all of it, plus the work involved in nurturing the leads and bringing you the motivated sellers for less than this amount, which means fundamentally you're getting the best out of it, independently of whether you are a private equity group. So you might offset some of this cost or reallocate some of these human resources towards more towards higher revenue generating activities. Or if you're doing everything on your own, you can offset some of the fixed investment by getting somebody that can actually take care of the process for you. And then all you need to take care of is just closing the deals that we bring to the table. So in a nutshell, this is just a breakdown of some of the costs associated with sourcing motivated sellers. There are more. Here I tried to be as conservative and I would say as frugal as possible. So removing everything that is not strictly necessary, just putting in the very basic stuff that you need. Some people might argue that you can reduce data costs. That's true. But the objective here is to show you that if you want to do everything on your own, you're going to shoulder a lot of the investment and a lot of the effort that you need to put in. And most of the times, that is not worth it. Independently of whether you are a big firm or a individual, maybe a broker, you can allocate your resources and your time in a much better way when you have somebody like our M&A partner firm that sources the deals on your behalf, because then, well, you are more focused first. You create a solid pipeline that is managed on your behalf. And at the same time, you get to allocate all your resources towards closing the deals. And that's ultimately what we do when we work with clients one-on-one, even when we work with them, in a very bespoke fashion. And we build entire infrastructures based on their needs and their demands, and we adjust it accordingly. So the long story short is, if you're interested in working with somebody that can originate deal flow and transactions on your behalf, you want to offset some of this cost while still getting the upside at the end of it, then there's going to be a button below the video where you can book a strategy session to discuss whether or not we can work together. Generally, we are pretty booked up for our done for you service, where we do everything for you. But provided we have slots available, we'll be able to look into that and see whether or not we can take you on, and whether or not there's a match between what you're looking to accomplish and what we are trying to do for you. The idea there is we work with a limited amount of people, because the process that we run is very bespoke, which means we need to put a lot of emphasis and focus on what we do with a few people in order to get them the outcome they desire. And that is ultimately the point. If you want something that is very specific and that can enable you in your specific case to achieve results, then you can forget about all of this, forget about all this fixed cost and recurring cost associated to running this system. Just have a partner shoulder all of that and then bring you qualified opportunities almost on autopilot. So if that is of interest to you, click the link down below. We'll see you on the other side, and I will also see you in the next video.